Oof, real people. Hi, everybody. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I'm a culture writer for BuzzFeed News. I'm really delighted to be with you today. And let me begin by telling you the year I was born. I was born in the year 1988. Good year, solid year. I don't have any particular memories of that time. But the reason I'm starting there is because I was 1 when the Berlin Wall fell. I was 3 when the Soviet Union collapsed. I was also 3 when Nirvana's Nevermind came out, but I don't know, that's neither here nor there. But I'm starting there because 2 years before I was born, the German sociologist Ulrich Speck wrote a book called Risk Society. And Beck was kind of frustrated with this trend of calling everything post, okay? We'll get to what's next in a minute. I have a clock here, but it is lying because I'm just gonna go way over time. It's gonna be great. Okay, so Ulrich Beck was frustrated with this trend of calling everything post. He was like, everything can't be post. Post-war, post-industrial, post-everything, post-modern. And he said, look, post is a definition that is necessarily negative. It doesn't actually define the age that we live in. And instead, he sort of sought to sort of give us some kind of grounding for what they were living through at the time, this era of great war, great power conflict. And the term that he came up with is risk society. Risk society is sort of dictating that everyone is living in a world where they're trying to figure out how to manage their own personal risk in relationship to other people, other countries, other people in their community. And the reason I was thinking of Ulrich Beck is that we appear to have found ourselves in that world. Because of the pandemic, yes, but also because of some stuff that we put ourselves through. Namely, we are in a moment of low trust in media, low trust in institutions, low trust in government. The pandemic did not begin these trends, but it certainly accelerated them. And we have found ourselves in a moment where masks and vaccines have become a way for us to evaluate whether another person is risky to us or not. It's going to be interesting, I think, for us to remember this moment in time 10, 20 years down the road where maybe we were quick to judge people, but maybe we were quick to judge people specifically based on what they did when they were the most scared they'd ever been. And that really resonated with me because I think our pop culture kind of reflected this. Our pop culture really reflected we've been living in a moment for some time of really fragmented pop culture. So for example, a lot of people are sort of consuming different news sources. We don't know the same things in common. That's sort of starting to become more and more frequent in that way. And that's, for me, an interesting question because then I sort of begin to look at, well, what are the things that we're gravitating to together? And during the pandemic, we really accelerated this trend of everybody's watching different shows. Nobody's watching the same thing together. Nobody's consuming the same kind of pop culture. Pop culture that I grew up on used to be that we all watched the same thing on the same night. Thursday was Friends Night, okay? You didn't do anything else on Thursday because you had to catch up on, I don't know what Ross and Rachel were doing. But we kind of find ourselves in a moment where everybody's watching different things at different paces and they're not consuming the same pop culture moments and therefore not having the same kind of catharsis. And what shows were breaking through, it appeared to me, were shows that dealt with history. This is interesting. Shows that dealt with history, but not necessarily history that was long in the past, just history that's relatively modern, but they wanted to reframe it. For example, how many of you saw one of the, 87 million Britney Spears documentaries? Anybody? Yeah, too many of them. Nobody needs that many. But we wanted to sort of relitigate that moment. We wanted to relitigate that in sort of recent history that we all shared and think about it from a different perspective. And I think that's what those documentaries did. There was also the Chernobyl show. We also saw the Pam and Tommy show. I don't know how many of you guys watched it. It's pretty good. You should do it. It's good. But the real point that I'm trying to make is that we seem to be living through this moment that is the You're Wrong Aboutification of culture. You're Wrong About is a very good podcast that sort of takes an event that happened in the past and then says, everything you know about this thing is actually wrong. And so much of the pop culture we're consuming right now is taking that concept and saying, look, You thought you knew Britney Spears, but you don't. And making you go through the motions of recognizing that actually there's more to the story, and I think that's interesting. But what's more interesting to me is, why are these the shows? Why are these the shows that are breaking through? Why are these the shows that people want to talk about regularly? And I'm one of those people who, I'm a culture writer for a living. That means I have the very joyful job of trying to think through, hey, everybody's talking about this show. Why is that the thing? Sometimes that means spending the whole day watching a television show and being like, I don't like it. It's pretty good, you should try it. But the real point that I want to get to, right, is that because these shows are talking about recent history, they're also talking about contested history. They're all talking about, history that we remember just a little bit differently. And we want to have a fight about it. We want to say, you know what, we remember this thing in this way. We remember the way we treated Britney Spears in a different way. We were having the celebrity commentators at the time who put many of the young women through the ringer, through incredibly sexist coverage, and they are having to speak for themselves and saying, that's how everybody was talking. And we get to sort of sit on our own sort of moral high ground and say, you know what, I wasn't doing that back then. It's not true, everybody was doing it. That's sort of the thing about history, is that we seem to sort of smooth over the uncomfortable parts of it. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is that I used to work on a TV show. The agenda was Steve Paikin, TVO, and he did a whole sort of series about a central question, okay? And the question was this: what do we need to know in common? What is the thing that all of us need to know in common? And it's a question that I think about a lot, specifically because if we push it one step further, then the question becomes, what do we need to know in common in order for us to become a we? What is the bare minimum amount of information that we need to consume in order for us to maintain some kind of we? Because if we are all living in different worlds, consuming different news, having different moral relationships to the different pieces of news that we're consuming, that idea of a we begins to fray relatively quickly. Ooh, are you sure about this clock? Oh, wow, okay. And as I think through that question, I think that's what's next, right? I think that is what's next, is that maybe the reason that these are the shows that are breaking through, maybe the reason that these are the shows bucking the trend of, the loss of the monoculture, the idea that we all used to watch the same shows and we stopped, and then now these are the shows that are breaking through. Maybe that's what's next. Maybe the next thing that we need to figure out together is, what is our version of this contested history, the history that we're living through right now? I'm excited about that because it also means that we get to turn to historians, historically a rambunctious bunch who want to share a lot of information, and very few people are listening to them, but they're like, this is our moment. And so I'm excited for the era of historians to begin. I think we need historians more than we've ever needed them, to explain to us these moments that we're living through, but also to help us understand how we not make the same mistakes again. Thank you.